The death toll from the Grenfell Tower fire in London is raised to 58 as public anger continues to simmer. Prime Minister Theresa May admits initial support for families was not good enough. Tens of thousands take to the streets in Mali, angry over a draft constitutional reform adopted by the government, which would give the president the power to elect a third of the Senate. And a mistrial is declared in the Bill Cosby sexual assault case after the Pennsylvania jury were unable to reach a unanimous decision. Hello and welcome to France 24. I'm Catherine Clifford. The death toll from the Grenfell Tower fire was raised to 58 this Saturday in London. Police say the figure includes confirmed and presumed deaths. Meanwhile, the Queen held a minute of silence for victims during her official birthday celebrations. Anger is simmering as authorities face accusations of cutting corners on fire safety in social housing. Prime Minister Theresa May's come under heavy criticism for her response. She met with victims and volunteers at Downing Street this Saturday and admitted initial support for families wasn't good enough. Cal Brown has this report.
Below the burnt-out husk of the Grenfell high-rise, residents and their loved ones gather to commemorate the victims of Wednesday's fire. But even as they mourn the dead, the toll grows as police acknowledge that they're unlikely to find any more of the missing alive.
There are 58 people who we have been told were in Grenfell Tower on the night that are missing, and therefore, sadly, I have to assume that they are dead.
The Queen and Prince Philip held a minute's silence for the victims. It was among several commemorative events to take place on Saturday. But protesters too took to London streets for another day to denounce the government's handling of the fire. Numerous residents had complained about the poor condition of the high-rise's emergency exits and the apparent absence of sprinklers.
It is absolutely important for anybody in a place of responsibility or position of responsibility to do everything that is possible to do to ensure this doesn't happen again. Surely in the 21st century we can put together housing that is safe.
Police said on Saturday that their investigation would examine the refurbishment of the building in 2016, saying they would bring prosecutions if there's evidence. The fire, which ripped through the social housing block as residents slept in the early hours of Wednesday morning, has reignited angry debate about poor housing in parts of Britain and deep inequality.
Here in Paris, voters are set to head to the polls this Sunday in the second round of parliamentary elections. In some of France's overseas territories like Guadeloupe, Martinique and French Guiana, voting has already begun. And as in metropolitan France, some regions, like France's Caribbean islands, saw very low turnout numbers in the first round 2 weeks ago, something they fear could happen again this weekend.
The city of Pointe-à-Pitre, Guadeloupe.
She's voted.
Some of the first voters turned up in the overseas territory at 8 a.m. local time for France's second round of legislative elections. But they've been few and far between. It's the same story in French Guiana, where only a quarter of eligible voters cast a ballot in the first round last weekend, a record low.
Last time no one showed up. I hope the abstention rate will be reduced a bit.
Some French overseas territories, such as the Caribbean islands of Martinique and Saint-Martin, have small populations, but they carry some weight in the legislature. In all, 27 MPs will be voted into the assembly. In U.S. states like Washington, D.C., French voters cast ballots for their constituencies back home. In mainland France, volunteers making last-minute checks before Sunday's vote fear a low voter turnout.
We have this phenomenon of very low voter participation. Every election, it's getting more and more difficult to get people to come out and vote.
Last Sunday, in the first round, voter turnout hovered at about 50%, a record low for the Fifth Republic. But that hasn't altered expectations of a landslide for President Emmanuel Macron's party, Republic on the Move.
American and Japanese vessels and aircraft are searching for 7 American sailors. They were declared missing after their U.S. Navy destroyer, USS Fitzgerald, collided with a container ship off the coast of Japan around dawn on Saturday. At least 3 other sailors were injured. The USS Fitzgerald's now back at its home port in Yokosuka Naval Base. Meanwhile, officials have begun questioning crew members of the Philippine-flagged container ship about the cause of the crash.
Limping home, the USS Fitzgerald returns to port at Yokosuka Naval Base, just south of Tokyo. As crew members pump water from flooded areas, divers are still trying to reach parts of the vessel smashed in the accident.
We still got an active search and rescue going on for our missing shipmates, so please keep them in your thoughts and prayers. And really like to thank the whole Yokosuka community and also our Japanese partners. They've been tremendous throughout this.
The Navy destroyer was badly damaged on its starboard side after a nighttime collision with a Philippine-flagged merchant vessel, roughly 3 times its size. The military vessel's deck and part of its radar equipment were crushed. The incident happened in a busy shipping lane, generally filled with container ships going to and from Tokyo and Yokohama. Several of the USS Fitzgerald's crew members were injured and evacuated by air to hospital, including the ship's commanding officer. Officials in Tokyo, where the container ship was docked, have begun questioning crew members about the cause of the crash.
It's been 3 weeks since militants declaring allegiance to the Islamic State group rampaged through the Philippine city of Marawi. Ever since, armed forces have tried to dislodge them, and while the fighting is still ongoing, thoughts are slowly starting to return to the city's eventual reconstruction.
The presence of
Smoke hangs in the air above Marawi as Filipino armed forces pound Islamic State group extremists from above and below. After over 3 weeks of heavy conflict, battle-weary soldiers are finally pushing the militants back.
the presence of human shields being utilized by the enemy make our approaches quite difficult.
I was wounded, and we were trapped for 3 days. There was hardly any water or food, and at night we couldn't sleep.
The militants rampaged through Marawi late in May in their hundreds, backed up by foreign fighters who'd come to pitch in. President Rodrigo Duterte declared martial law and sent in the military to counterattack. Authorities say the combat's currently left in excess of 300 dead on all sides, though the extremists have borne the brunt of the casualties, with some 400 fresh troops moving into action on Saturday. Despite the pitched nature of the battle, thoughts are beginning to turn to what comes next.
Once we get to the end of hostilities is achieved, and will make way and pave the way for the entry of an assessment team to conduct a survey of the damage and the requirements that will be needed to rebuild and reconstruct Marawi again.
That may take some time. With much of the city sealed off, it's not yet known how bad the damage is. Not to mention more than 300,000 people who've fled Marawi and its surrounding areas who'll need to return to pick up the pieces of their lives.
Now to Mali, where tens of thousands of people have taken to the streets in protests. They're angry that the government has adopted a draft constitutional reform designed to improve the representation of the country's northern region within institutions. Opponents say it would give the president too much power, as he'd be able to appoint 1/3 of future senators. Anthony Fouchard in Bamako reports.
Demonstrators out in force to protest constitutional reform. The government's attempt to change a fundamental law has caused massive public outcry. Protesters believe it's a move towards autocratic leadership.
There are 8 institutions. The president will manage 7. He will appoint the president of the Constitutional Court, the president of the Supreme Court. He will also appoint a third of the Senate. Where's the constitutional balance? Where's the sovereignty of the people? We don't want this. It's an institutional dictatorship, not democracy. We don't want this for our country.
The government plans to hold a referendum on the 9th of July, yet parts of the country remain either under threat from terrorists or occupied by armed groups.
I left Timbuktu to come and claim my rights here. The population is suffering. The north is occupied by rebels and armed bandits. We can't vote in the referendum.
A protest under heavy police surveillance. Bridges leading to the city centre have been blocked.
They blocked the 2 bridges. Even if you go near the hospital, they blocked it off. Even on foot, people can't come here. Why? Because they don't want people to join the protest.
Earlier, 2 previous demonstrations were unauthorised and protesters dispersed violently. Today, opponents of the reform have been able to protest in Bamako and say they plan to march again.
Braving temperatures of 40 degrees Celsius, thousands took to the streets of Madrid this Saturday to demand the Spanish government fulfills its promises on sheltering refugees. Spain has taken in fewer than 10% of the refugees it pledged to accept by September. It's relocated or resettled some 1,000 of the 17,000 people that it promised to take in September 2015. And a US judge has declared a mistrial this Saturday in Bill Cosby's sexual assault case. The 7 men and 5 women on the jury in Norristown, Pennsylvania, were unable to reach a unanimous decision after some 53 hours. The US entertainer had faced years in prison for allegedly drugging and sexually assaulting Andrea Constant at his home in 2004. Prosecutors immediately said they would seek a second trial.
After more than 52 hours of deliberation over a 6-day trial, the jury failed to agree on a unanimous decision. The Cosby Show star accused of drugging and sexually violating Andrea Constant in 2004 left the court a free man. The judge declared a mistrial.
This is what happens. Juries are stuck. When a prosecutor seeks to put someone in prison for things that are simply not presented in the courtroom.
The 79-year-old comedian has been accused of sexual misconduct, battery, abuse and rape by over 50 women, with the earliest incidents allegedly taking place in the mid-1960s. Thus far, Andrea Constant is the only plaintiff who has been able to take her accusations to criminal court. Following the mistrial, the local prosecutor vowed to try again, declaring Constant was entitled to a verdict.
We will evaluate and review our case. We hope that doing this and moving forward in this case sends a strong message that victims of these type of crimes can come forward and can be heard on what has happened to them.
Inconsistencies in Andrea Constant's statement and a robust performance by Cosby's defense team reportedly led to the jury's standstill and the resulting mistrial. The attorney representing many of Cosby's accusers is demanding the court allow more witnesses to testify at the next trial.
And if you'd like to look into any of the stories we've been covering tonight, you can head to our website www.france24.com. As you can see there, our top story tonight, the London Tower Block fire, where police say now 58 people are assumed dead. And that's all we have time for. Do stay tuned to France 24.